man who knows a lot about surviving in the cutthroat environment of US politics is Republican Mike Huckabee, who served over 10 years as the governor of Arkansas. He twice ran for the presidency and was one of more than a dozen candidates swept aside by Donald Trump in the 2016 race for the Republican Party's presidential nomination. Mike Huckabee knows firsthand how fierce a fighter Trump can be, and he's not buying the pundits' predictions of a Trump landslide loss. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, thanks for joining Sky News. Simply put, the poll numbers are terrible for President Trump. How does he turn it around? What exactly is the re-election strategy?
Well, the poll numbers were terrible 4 years ago, right about this time. In fact, they were terrible a month before the election. I think two things are at play. One, I'm not going to say that the president doesn't have some, maybe some course corrections to make. I think that is correct. But I also believe that polls are not completely accurate when it comes to President Trump, because there are so many people who simply do not want to tell a pollster or anybody that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. They don't want to be called a bigot, a racist, a homophobe, a xenophobe. They get called all sorts of names. They have things thrown at their homes, and they just don't want to go through that. But when it comes right down to it, and they have to go into the voting booth and decide what kind of policies they want. Do they want the policies of Donald Trump, which cut taxes, stopped regulation, believes in the sanctity of life, believes in religious liberty, personal freedom, law and order? Or do you want the policies of Joe Biden, the Green New Deal, higher taxes, open borders, mob rule, where the police are defunded? These are big, huge differences. And I think as the election draws near and both of these men stand on the same stage at a debate, you'll see those numbers shift quickly and dramatically.
Now, Donald Trump has long spruiked his success in boosting the US economy, and he used to have the stats to back that up. But that's all changed now due to the COVID-19 crisis. The US unemployment rate is near Great Depression levels. So how does he play it now? How can he make the economy the focus of his campaign? And if that's not the focus, what should be?
Well, I think a lot of people recognize that he didn't create the COVID crisis and that the economy was roaring before it happened. And through no fault of his own, everything collapsed when people lost their jobs and businesses shut down. Now, granted, I think we're seeing some pretty dramatic comebacks in the stock market, seeing jobs start to come back, although, you know, it's not an immediate thing. So, yes, the COVID crisis has upended the economic numbers that the president had. But going into the fall and getting close to election time, those numbers should continue to improve. But I think he's got to focus on how he's handling not only the economic issue, but I do think that his management of the COVID crisis is going to be a major part of how people will judge him as worthy of a second term as president.
One of the Trump team's re-election mottos is promises made, promises kept. And while he has delivered on some of his promises, he's missed a few of his targets. Some of those popular undelivered promises include sending US troops home, yet US troops are still engaged in multiple foreign nations, and draining the swamp, yet critics suggest the president has rewarded and enriched former lobbyists, party donors, and even members of his family. So how much will the fact that he hasn't delivered on at least some of his promises hurt his chances in November?
Well, I feel like he's delivered on far more than most any president I've seen in my lifetime. Whether it's delivering on the promise to deregulate business, he has done that effectively. He's appointed people to the judiciary, over 200, that are truly constitutionalists. That's huge, and that's a legacy that will go on for the next 40 years. There are so many things this president has done. As far as draining the swamp, I think he's tried, but every time he takes any action to do it, he gets sued. And he's dealing with a judiciary branch that's largely filled with swamp creatures who often stop his ability to do what would be a much better draining of the swamp. So he fights Congress. He sometimes fights a lot of the people in his own party. There are a lot of Republicans who do not like the president because he's messing up their playground. So the president has a battle on every front. I think he's doing pretty well in fighting it. In fact, sometimes I marvel at his ability to let this stuff roll off of him, that he's even willing to wake up and get out of bed and go face the fight every day.
The Trump campaign says Joe Biden hasn't done too much in the past few months. They say he's simply hiding in his basement. What do you make of his strategy so far? Does he need to do anything drastic? Can't he just keep quiet and coast to victory?
Well, he can't do that all the way to the election. It's been a pretty effective strategy because every time he does open his mouth, he puts his foot in it. You might say that the only time Joe Biden opens his mouth is to change feet, because the things that he says that are so sometimes unintelligible and often are just such ridiculous gaffes that he spends then the next 3 days after he says something trying to walk it back. But I think Joe Biden's biggest problem is this man's been in politics for 50 years. Think about that, 50 years, his entire life. The only thing he's ever done is a government job. But what does he have to show for it? Plagiarism? Ineffective foreign policy? There's really not a whole lot that he can say. Joe Biden's got a lot to answer for. And at some point, he's got to come out of the hidey hole and stand up and deliver a message, which he has not done.
I noticed that plaque over your left shoulder, which reads, "Come, let us reason together," which is apropos to my final question to you, sir. Regardless of the result in November, how confident are you that we'll ever see some sort of return to civility? Or should we accept the fact that politics in the US will always be polarized, hyperpartisan, and driven by fear and anger?
A lot of it depends upon what younger Americans believe about their country. If they believe that taking to the streets and throwing bricks through windows and stealing items from a store is okay, then we're going to be in real trouble. I'm not sure this republic survives that, if that's the mindset of the next generation. If they believe that free speech means you have to agree with them, and that if you don't, you're supposed to lose your job, lose your business, be firebombed, then we're not going to make it. That's as simple as I can put it. But I think we always have the opportunity to come back as a nation, to realize some of the errors of our ways, and to realize that the polarization, the intense level of anxiety is not helpful. Look, I've said for many years, one of the reasons that plaque is over my shoulder, it was on the mantle in my office when I was governor for almost 11 years. And it reminds me that, Democrats aren't wrong all the time. Republicans aren't right all the time. Part of governing is working with other people, recognizing that those great political scientists, the Rolling Stones, have it right. You can't always get what you want. That's how politics works.
Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, thanks for joining Sky News Your World.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.